Hi, my name's Lewis, and today I'll be talking about standard music notation in relation to pitch and rhythm. So, for those beginning music students, you probably have a lot of questions, which is natural, and it's going to help you become a better musician the more you work to answer these questions. So, first, a fun fact. Western musical notation in its first forms was invented by Catholic monks in monasteries. So, if it sounds like church music, chances are it probably was at one point. So, moving on, let's talk about how pitches sound the further up staff lines as opposed to perpendicularly below notes that are directly below it. So, uh, an example of this would be, well, let's start off with just one pitch at a time. So, this is a C, and the reason I know is because on the piano, C will always be this, just how it will always be it, an octave below. An octave is 7 letters below it, or an octave above, which is 7 letters above that. First, Do, which is C. So I'm using Do and C interchangeably because of solfege syllables, and that's an easier way to determine what key signature you're in, but we won't get into that yet. So with solfege syllables, you could use it to um, uh, create your scales and definitely hear them for what they are without even touching an instrument. And I think that's the beauty of solfege. So, for example, on the piano, uh, I will just play you a simple scale with solfege, so you have an idea of what this sounds like in your ear. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. So that's actually how it was stepwise. It wasn't the most legato, but just an idea of that, so you have in your mind, in your ear. And next, let's talk about how music is written on the staff. Okay, cool. So using a demonstration of how pitch works on the staff, just to take it one step above, we could use something called a gliss, and it can also be done on the guitar. Right. Now, in our choral exercises, in order to help find our pitches and just arrive right on top of each note, we'll sometimes use an exercise with the conductor where he will hold an imaginary ball in his hand, and the higher he throws it up, and sometimes, just to have fun with the choir, he'll leave it up there. What I really appreciate about this exercise is it teaches you how to become comfortable using your voice to identify pitch. Next, I want to talk briefly about what a chord is. So, simply put, a chord is just more than one note played at the same time on one given beat. So, there's different types of chords. They can get pretty advanced. So, we'll just start with something simple like 2 notes at once. What is that called? It has a name. It's called an interval. So when you have an extra note stacked on top of those two, you get something called a triad. And you can build a triad on any one of the 7 letters, and then you have a scale with harmonies in it, and it sounds something like this. As opposed to yeah, so that's what that sounds like. So you could get that in your ear. Next, I want to talk about stepwise motion. So that's what I was just playing with the C major scale. I'll go down an octave so you could kind of hear how pitch moves on the staff. So this would be 7 letters below the pitch that was originally on the staff. And you would usually find this C, as the octave on the ledger. I won't get into that right now. So solfege syllables are important. You could use them to know your scales and identify them without even touching an instrument. Next, moving on, I would like to talk about rhythm. So how does rhythm work within one bar? So just as an example, we have notes, which are written out with, they look different. So there's whole notes, which are just your big O's. And then you have something called a half note, which is it's a hollow note, not as large as the whole note, with a stem, and it could be pointed up or down. And then you also have quarter notes, which are solid dots. It's not it's not hollow anymore within the how the pitch is written on the staff. Now I want to move on to something a little faster than a quarter note, which is your eighth note. So an eighth note is going to have a little flag attached to it, and they're connected to each other if you have two eighth notes in one beat. And I wanted to clap some of those out. So just so you have it in your ear, what the duration of the whole note and what that feels like is the pulse goes something like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. It's not longer than one bar. A whole note is just 4 beats. Now, next I want to talk about the whole note. But no, I'm sorry, not the whole note. We just covered that. Next, I want to talk about the different types of meter. You have your duples, which you could double and call a quadruple. So what am I talking about when I say duple? Duple, in terms of meter, you would see this on the grand staff as a fraction, but it isn't a fraction. It's just a way to measure time within a bar. Now, duple is 2/4. You could feel this as 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And you could feel a triple, which is now instead of 2/4, it would be 3/4. Next, you want to hear that, so I'm gonna clap it out. 1, 2, 3. That's a whole note. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to go with a half note and 1 quarter note. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And for the last example, I'm going to attempt the eighth note, which I talked about earlier, which has a flag. So this is how this would sound like, using 2 quarter notes and 2 eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and a little faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So in order to feel the pulse like I just did and gradually increase tempo, it's important to do it correctly first, very slowly. And then that is just the best approach. If you have any problems, it'd be best to take an approach where you probably would need to just maybe take a break, cool down, and come back to it when it's a little less frustrating and you have it more in your mind's eye at that point. And it has a chance to develop. Next, I want to talk about subdividing. So rhythm can be pretty difficult and scary if you see a whole bunch of eighth notes, but it helps to feel the pulse when you actually break it down the way I did. So saying the ands, and instead of just trying to feel the silence in a beat. What am I talking about? For example, it would sound like 2 quarter notes and 2 eighth notes would sound like this without any subdivision. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I feel like the map could be a little clearer using these subdivisions, which is the and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. So right there, that's me feeling triplets in each beat. Triplet, 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 while still keeping track of which beat I am in within the bar. And next, I would like to just summarize all the points that I talked about in this video. So what I've just talked about is the fundamental elements of pitch and rhythm. So we talked about how music is written on the staff, and we talked briefly about what a chord is. We also talked about rhythm and how whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes work in relation to one bar of music. Next, we talked about meter, and then finally we talked about subdivision and how to feel the silences in between, right before the beat that follows. So I hope everything was pretty clear, and If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below, and have a good day.